Kusangpo and welcome to Dawai Kudroen. My guest tonight is Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Sangay Khandu. So thank you so much for your time. The first thing that I'm sure people would want to know is about the pay hike, which we have already discussed in our conversation, the deferment issue. You have deferred and received so much of appreciation from the public. I don't know about people of other Dzongkhaks, but the ones that I met in Thimphu had so much of appreciation and acknowledgement for what National Council did on pay hike. But today, you go by some of the reports. You have no choice, you had no choice, but accepted the hike. After all that drama, suddenly you had to accept the hike. And now people are beginning to lose trust and confidence in whatever you did. And this actually is a serious concern for an institution like National Council. Your take on this?
Thank you, Dawa. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for placing their trust in the National Council, however brief that was for. And I would like to believe that there are still people in our Bhutanese public who will understand what has happened in the larger context. In the life of a nation, a 5-year tenure of a parliament does not define the history of a country, and therefore whatever the National Council did in the past was with a sincere hope that we can contribute in a positive way, keeping in mind the concerns that we have surrounding our economy and issues we've had with the past government in terms of economy. But Parliament, like everywhere else, we have certain rules, procedures we must follow. And I would not really say that National Council took the pay raise after the deferment for some time because we did not have a choice. I think it would be wrong to say that. I think there's always a choice, but I think there are also reasons behind every choice. And so the choice we took, although was a painful choice in the sense we believed what we did earlier was the right thing to do. We had to take a decision because firstly, there were doubts also propagated by the government that the mandate of the National Council did not extend where the National Council could talk about the pay, whether it affected the economy badly or adversely. And added to that, there was some thoughts in society that the National Council perhaps may be overstepping its mandate. And so while we made our reservations very clear, heard to the nation, we gave the government a chance to reconsider, and I feel they must have reconsidered it, and they still were confident about what they could do. And so I suppose the decision was really with the larger interest of allowing the government the benefit of the doubt and let them prove themselves. And so the bottom line was that the National Council will respect and abide by the decision of the government.
Yes.
But at the same time, we will continue to review in the next several months, as mandated, the state of affairs concerning our economy and the external sector, balance of payment, balance of trade, whatever concerns we've had. So it is not, it would not be correct to assume that because the National Council has now decided not to defer its pay, that we will not continue to review and scrutinize state functions.
Yes, sir. But will it make any difference? Because if you look at some of the statements that government came up with, it almost sounds quite clear that the National Council did succumb to the pressure put by the government, especially with regard to the pay hike.
I think the National Council did not succumb to any pressure. The National Council took a decision because we are a house, or I like to believe that we are a house that listens to society as it should be, and we heard various arguments and sides of arguments, and eventually we had to come to a consensus, and consensus building is a very painful process. And eventually we had a consensus that while many of us felt deferring the pay was a necessity to allow for growth of confidence in politicians in the country.
Yes.
Some corners felt that perhaps the National Council was hitting below the belt. Some even labelled the National Council's decision as playing dirty politics. And I would like to believe that our decision was keeping in mind all of this, taking stock of all the actions that the National Council took, having exhausted all of that we, at the end of the day, we must respect and abide by the procedures.
Yes. Even within the House, you had some of the honourable members of Parliament who went all out asking for the raise. So should I understand it as the challenges within the House when you mentioned the painful process of getting the consensus?
I would not like to. I wouldn't want to limit it to just this subject, but for all discussions on bills and including this pay report, consensus building is painful in the sense you have to go through a lot of discussions, debates, and arguments.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you'll always find some people not happy with the decision. And I think when I said painful, it is in that context. And for the pay raise, it was simpler because the members did not have to ask for the pay raise because it was already given by the government. It was offered on the table. And so the debate was not so much about wanting it or not. The debate really within the members was, is it justified for us to take it or not? And so some members felt that we should wait. It wasn't like we will not take. Some of the members felt that it should be deferred, while some felt that we still have a review function, and we respect what the government has decided and National Assembly has decided because it's their mandate, and also continue to scrutinize and review very closely the state of the economy in the next few months.
Yes. So what next? On pay hike, what next? Now the raise is through. National Council had to accept. So should we just stick to this classic Buddhist symptom of having short memories and let it forget after some time and move on with another issues coming? That's the only possibility we could see. So what next?
No, I tend to disagree with what you've just said, because I think we might imagine that we have short memory, but when memories are linked to reality, it's very difficult to try and evade that or try to put that under a pillow and try to forget it.
Yes.
Because the reality of the matter is, and as suspected, if the economy does not improve, in fact, if it worsens, yes, we've increased the pay. People may not be entirely happy. Government has convinced us all is well. But if the economy does deteriorate, the pinch or the fallout of the deterioration in the economy will be a reality, and none of us could escape that, including the media. And I think it is the responsibility of the media to remind each and every one of us if we forget, if we try to ignore it. But the fact remains that if the economy does deteriorate, we would not be able to fall back on our belief that we have short memory and therefore we'll forget. Everybody is going to get pinched, and when the pinch is there, I think there will be questions asked. There will be issues of accountability, and people who made the decisions will have to be held responsible. And some people may simply put it, but perhaps a little dramatizing it, heads will have to roll. And I think people have to learn to take responsibility for their decisions. And it is then that the National Council's early decisions and remarks and observations will once again come into view. And that the National Council had tried its best, and that eventually we tried to respect the procedures.
Yes. Some might have longer memories, some would have shorter ones. But one issue that will remain in the minds of the people would be that National Council initially deferred, and after so much of drama, again you have to accept the pay. There are some people who still feel that the National Council should have stuck with the decision of deferment, come what may. Whatever government pressures are there, you should have stuck to it. So that actually would affect you as a House of Review and National Council as an institution. People have the feeling that it might affect your credibility as an institution.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we are yet to see if things are on the climb or if the economy is on the deceleration. And in a couple of months and the next few years, if the economy does improve, I think one thing will be very clear is, while with the good and earnest intent the National Council made its observations, it would have proven that the government was correct and they have done their due diligence. And the National Council tried its best, but the the government was confident and they did their homework properly, la, and I think everybody will be happy, la, and that's where we want to be. La. But if the economy should deteriorate, and it could be linked to some of these decisions that the government has taken, while some people, I think it's difficult to please everybody, but if some people feel that what the National Council said was correct, I think that would have a great meaning for even no matter how brief the decision was for us. As far as doing away with the deferment, I think, we probably have differing viewpoints even in the National Council. But I said it was a consensus building. Some members felt that, one could continue with the deferment. But there were some members who felt that because there was already discussion of not respecting a law, that once it's a law, whether you agree with it or disagreement, you have dissenting voices and opinions, but you must abide and respect for it. And I think that's a subject we need to discuss, because we've had members of Parliament challenging laws made by Parliament in the last government too. For example, the tobacco legislation was such an example. It went through all the process of legislation and it was pronounced a law. Yet, because there was perception that the law was not fair, dissenting voices were raised, opinions were made, but it was never really looked at as going against the law or disrespecting parliamentary procedures. But in this case, these issues were raised. Yes. And I think the bigger issue we have today is we need to discuss that whenever we raise concerns with a law, does it mean you're disrespecting Parliament, or does it simply mean you're respecting parliamentary process by actually opening up argument and debate? I think that's a bigger question we need to ask ourselves today.
Yes. Now, to move on, one issue that was raised through some media reports was that it was never a mandate of the National Council to review the pay hike and whether the government is capable of going for a hike or not. What do you say? Now, you have been in the National Council, you have been deliberating on so many issues, not just the pay hike. You have had so much of deliberations, big time. And then people really had so much of appreciation on how the deliberations went on, how the discussions took place. And suddenly, after the sessions were over, you come to realize that not much impact has been made. And then thereby you are leaving people to believe that National Council is a toothless institution. You can't do much, but just deliberate big time and leave it there.
Well, actually, some people in social media have actually, written to me and said full of fury with no output or no, eventual outcome.
Yes.
And I think it's a little too early, in the sense the society needs to allow the institution to grow as an institution, and the National Council is such an institution, and we are encouraged greatly by the confidence or faith that we enjoy from the Bhutanese public. And I believe, or I think, with the very recent decision, some of that may have been shaken. We might have lost some, but we would like to believe that there are 4 more years of the government, and still more, many decades and centuries for Bhutan as a country to continue to grow. And this institution cannot be judged on one single incident. It has to be accumulative, and it is not to say that the pay revision is in the back and it's forgotten in its history. We will be discussing it in the sense the pay commission report, how much of it should or could be considered to be given due weightage.
Yes.
Do we need more clarity and transparency in how the pay commission is constituted and how it submits its report to the government? Do we also talk about if the government makes a wrong decision, accountability, such as the pay? And when it comes to pay, the National Council has a mandate, in the sense it's not our mandate to really discuss the pay. People could argue. But the National Council, when we first began in Parliament, our definition of it was that while National Council would scrutinize state functions, which is written in a very earlier article, which allows us to ask many questions to the government, the more important one is also, and equally important, equally important is security and sovereignty.
Yes.
And in modern times, security and sovereignty cannot just be geographical security. It has to be political and economic and social. And it is in this context that when we review expenses or finance or money bill that a government makes, which is like the salary, in terms of economic security, what does it mean? In terms of social security, what does it mean? In terms of political security, what does it mean? And so to write off the mandate of National Council is, I think, is fundamentally wrong.
So one issue, during the Dzongkha session, I could not find time to ask this follow-up question, but during the Dzongkha session you mentioned about some of the honorable members of National Council being so considerate and compassionate about the government proceedings, because we have a new government in place, so we need to give them enough time to grow. While it's good in a Buddhist community like ours, while it's good to be compassionate, while it's good to be having this sympathy for certain new developments, did you all ever realize that you're failing in your duties while trying to have that compassion, rather say a misplaced compassion you would have?
But one thing needs to be put straight on the record is that while the National Council had internal discussions about some members with the opinion that the government needs to be given some time to implement some of their policies so that we can review, and therefore the reference to being a new government and therefore some time, not so much out of sympathy or empathy, but really we need something to review in the first place. While some people said, a politician, when he steps into politics, public life, comes with certain promises of certain ideas, want to implement certain plans, and so day one we could start reviewing and asking questions, because nobody could say I'm new and therefore I'm still preparing. But those are very left aside, the internal discussions. The functioning of the National Council, in my own understanding, has not been compromised greatly, in the sense we've continued to do what we were mandated to do. I mean, I referred to a question that asked the government the expenses for the ministers for the last 6 years, and that started from the second session of Parliament. So as far as I'm concerned, I've not been empathetic or sympathetic for that matter, and because there is no need. It is their job and it is our job to review their job. First session, the 11th five-year plan was discussed. On behalf of my own constituencies, like my colleagues, we raised issues. I clearly brought out an issue to the government saying, well, Lunana Gyok is the last Gyok of 205 Gyok which needs to be connected by a road, and it was the government's policy. And I asked if the 11th five-year plan was going to see that through, to which the finance minister responded that it is against government policies. Of course, I don't know which policy it is against, but certainly did not make sense to me, and my constituents weren't very happy to hear that. Consequently, the first financial year's budget discussion also, I brought the same issue out. And so, looking back, I do not have any regrets of having empathized with anybody, and I don't think the government expects any empathy as well. They've made it very clear that they're there to serve the people and they're ready. And if we haven't asked the questions that we need to, perhaps we may have failed. But as far as I'm concerned, I've perhaps because I've had the benefit of already a term before this term, I've asked questions that needed to be asked.
Yes. We have discussed this at length during Dzongkha session, but since we again brought this issue regarding the expenses incurred by the ministers on their travel, now some actually felt that you had some grievances against them, so that's why you asked for it, and the answer you got was that in fact you didn't get any answer out of it.
Well, I got an answer. The answer was they couldn't share it, which was not what was expected, obviously, because they've spent a lot of money, and I wouldn't want to say it was used properly or not, or whether it was even necessary or not, because I haven't seen the data, I haven't seen the number. But clearly a fundamental flaw in how this government thinks is that so long as you don't break rules, you don't need to share the expense details, which I think is very wrong. You may have followed the rule, but you still need to share the information. And I have no grievance, I have no agenda, no hidden agenda behind it. My only agenda is I am an MP, and for the next 5 years, for the next 4 years, I'll be an MP, and people have certain expectations of me. And when I entered my office, just like the government, we had to take our oath, and there are certain objectives with which we were put in as an MP. And it is only in this official capacity that I sought the information, and which would help and enrich our discussions in Parliament, which is what people of Bhutan expect from the parliament.
Yes.
Our debates cannot be hearsay and conversational. It has to be fact, it has to be based on figures, it has to be based on numbers. And my seeking these numbers from the government is based on the government's decision to bring in an austerity measure.
Yes.
And to understand austerity, we cannot just impose it on civil servants and corporate employees that you must cut down on travel expenditure. The example has to be set from the highest level of decision making, and that is the cabinet.
Yes.
And when the ministers can prove that yes, we have cut down on expenditure, and I think the rest of the country will automatically follow. And it's a good practice, it's a healthy practice. When I ask the question, I'm not thinking about this government or the next. I'm thinking about our government, which will be in perpetuity, the state.
Yes. Maybe one of the reasons that we could guess is the reason why you didn't get the answer is maybe the National Council didn't pass the RTI bill. This is one of the reasons given by some institutions.
No, I think RTI is one thing, and MP seeking answer from the government is another thing. In other countries, this information is sought by a citizen also. And that is where I think RTI would have come in. But if the government is really earnest about being transparent, there is no need for RTI law. Government can just share it, be an open government. But besides that, I think when an MP asks the government expenses of official travel expenses made from public money, not private money, it is valid because the Constitution allows for and states very clearly, enshrined in there, is that the executive shall be accountable to Parliament,
Yes.
which includes the National Council. And therefore, when you ask the government how they've spent the money, the public money, the taxpayers' money, and today everybody is talking about 5% tax, this, that, communication tax, fuel tax, vehicle tax. People want to know where that money is going.
Yes.
And today I represent, if not all, some segment of society, and people want to know where that tax money is going. And if travel expense is made from that money, I think Bhutanese people have the right and should be given the right and respected to know how much they spend. And I think that's why when the government used various arguments and reasons to say that first, the National Council doesn't have the mandate. Second, that the Royal Audit Authority looks at it.
Yes.
Thirdly, that the government may be looked at as being vindictive and attacking the previous government by disclosing the previous government's information. Clearly, these are arguments which does not hold water. But then again, I think it's for the Bhutanese population to also understand what is happening and what is at stake.
Yes. I have a follow-up question to this, but I just want to skip it because I have one important question left.
Yes.
So, on your blog,
Yes.
you mentioned about the Prime Minister's office being used to test products. If you could elaborate a bit on this, because you are the first one, for me at least, you are the first honourable member of Parliament who officially said this on record. I have not heard any honourable members of Parliament talking about this issue, even informally. So,
thank you, Dawa. This is something I've associated even from my first term. In my first term as a novice, as an amateur representative, which I still am, I spoke from my heart, and that is office of profit, misuse of authority, misuse of office. This is something that's something I have identified with for a long time, and therefore it felt natural for me to speak out. So during the first parliament also, I referred to certain violations of kind.
yes.
And there was a lot of discussions in parliament. But this time around, really some people have misunderstood as me not being supportive of electric cars in the country, which is very wrong. In fact, I was one of the very few members in the National Council when the discussions happened that electric cars should not be taxed. Many members felt electric cars should be taxed like fossil-based cars. But I felt electric cars should not be taxed in it because I think it's good for the country. Of course, there are concerns about the services that you provide with it, whether it be successful or not. But that's something else. But I agree. I support electric cars, so long as government does its homework. But my reference here really is the Prime Minister. So in a government office, when you procure something, you have to go through the procurement process.
Yes.
But if it's a gift, it's a gift. It's very clear. So, what I've learned learned is that the electric car or the Tesla test model car that our Prime Minister's office has been using, it's not a gift, and clearly isn't a procured vehicle. And when the Prime Minister, which occupies the the highest position, elected position in the country, is seen with photographs of the car on social media, which goes beyond borders of Bhutan, which also clearly looks like you're supporting electric cars is fine, but here it looks like you're supporting a particular car or owner.
Yes.
And so today I think it's, for me at least, it looks like, I haven't said it, but it's somewhere between misusing your office and not misusing it. It's a grey area. So I've referred it to as PM's stature of the Prime Minister's office being reduced to a product testing facility, because today it's the Tesla electric car. I don't know what the next product could be. It could be many other things.
So the answer to this is that Honorable Prime Minister takes this as a compliment, being titled as the brand ambassador of a product. He takes this as a compliment.
Well, with all due respect, I think if a Prime Minister is identified with a certain policy, a good policy, I think it's a compliment. So I would think that the Honorable Prime Minister, being the pioneer in promoting electric cars in the country, I think that's admirable, and that should be a compliment, and that is a compliment. But when the reference is not to promoting electric car as a policy, but promoting a certain business house, I definitely wouldn't think that's a compliment. I think it's, like I said, it's between misusing your office and I don't know, marketing, production, I don't know, something like that. But
yes,
what really is at stake is a question of ethics.
Yes.
And I think few people cannot decide whether it's correct for the PM's office to be seen doing that or not. I think the Bhutanese population needs to engage in discussion and think. It's about ethics. Does the Bhutanese Prime Minister's office appear fair to be doing that or not? That's the question.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Discussions will continue. Debates will keep happening. Debates will continue. So it's always a pleasure having you on a forum like this. And one thing that as a moderator or as an anchor I've always enjoyed is you have always been outspoken. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
With this, we come to the end of Dawai Kudroen. Thank you so much for watching Dawai Kudroen, and it's time to say good night. Tashidele.